You're watching Newsfeed. Let's get into this discussion now. The levels of corruption in South Africa have reached completely unacceptable proportions. This is according to Chief Justice of South Africa, Raymond Zondo, addressing the National Anti-Corruption Summit. The Chief Justice warning that if nothing is done to address the worsening graft levels, the citizens will have no place to call home. Well, here to expand on that particular matter, including other issues that we are going to explore with the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, joining me now for this conversation. Chief Justice, thank you very much for your time. And finally, we get to talk to you. Let's start with exactly those comments that you made last week. Why did you issue such a warning, a dire warning about corruption levels in the country? What were you basing your analysis on?
Well, Xoli, it was based on my understanding of the levels of corruption as revealed in the evidence before the commission that I was honored to chair. But it is also based on what we see and what we read and what we hear every day in our country. And bearing in mind that the concerns about corruption in this country being too high are not concerns that have only arisen now. It's been many, many, many years. And when one looks at the levels of corruption, they suggest that whatever we have been doing as a country to try and fight corruption simply doesn't seem to be working, because the levels of corruption in this country shouldn't be where they are if one looks at the fact that we boast a number of institutions that are meant to fight corruption. I mean, for me, one of the things that was very, very strange was that while I was hearing evidence of corruption and state capture during the time of the commission, people had the temerity to engage in large-scale corruption involving PPEs during COVID. That said to me, it meant that people were looking at what the commission was doing, despite the fact that the commission was uncovering extensive corruption. It meant that they didn't care. And the question for me was, what is it that make people behave like this when this commission is still going on? Because one would have thought that they would have been frightened, they would have been deterred, because they would have seen that it looked like there would be consequences. But it's like they knew something that I might not have known at that time. Namely, that the commission can hear evidence, it will make whatever recommendations, but we know that nothing will be done to us, so we can continue with corruption as if there is no commission.
Exactly.
So even today, one reads in newspapers all kinds of horrifying stories of how taxpayers' money has been used in corruption, things that we read every day. It's like people know that there will be no consequences. And unfortunately, indeed, when one looks at the many incidents of corruption that the country has had over the years, and one looks at where there have been consequences, it looks like it's a very small part. And therefore people take the view that it's unlikely that I will face any consequences, so I can take my chances. And we have to say to ourselves as a country, what would we need to change? Because we can't be doing things the same way we have been doing them, and when we see that it's not working. We've got to say, going into the next 30 years of our democracy after elections next year, what do we need to do differently the day after elections?
Yes.
Because we can't continue to do the same thing, because then it means these levels of corruption are not only not going to go down, they are going to get worse. So that's what prompted me.
So, Chief Justice, I think it goes without saying that you are disappointed with what continues to be a situation of entrenched corruption in the country, despite the very commission that you led. I want to focus the attention on government. I know that there was also a very well-publicized back and forth, or should we say your comments around Parliament and whether or not they had initiated at least the steps that were needed in order to fulfill at least part of what your commission had uncovered about the work of that arm of government. But let's then talk about President Ramaphosa and whether or not the government he leads, when he says that they are dealing with corruption, they are implementing the recommendations and findings of your commission. Do you believe them?
Well, there is some activity that they are engaged in. I don't think that there are areas where they have completed, but there are some activities. The question is whether it's enough and whether it's happening with sufficient, in a sufficient pace. One of the things that people get very concerned about, and it's a concern that I share and I have, I think, expressed publicly in one way or another, is that the President promised when he responded to the Commission's report that in October last year, October 23, that as far as people who are ministers and deputy ministers are concerned, he would consider their position, their cases, I think one by one, and take a view. I am not aware that he has announced to the country that he has done so in regard to so-and-so and so-and-so, and he has come to the conclusion maybe that the findings of the commission were not justifiable, if that's what he might decide, therefore he won't take action. But the people of South Africa know the evidence that was led before the commission, because it was led in broad daylight. Everybody could hear witnesses, could see witnesses. You have somebody who was a Minister of State Security within the executive, who was a Minister of State Security at the time. The evidence that the people of South Africa had about his activities in that position during the time that was covered by the commission, evidence which involved money that witnesses said they gave to him, which he said he was going to pass on to the former president, Mr. Zuma.
Yeah.
Of course, there was no evidence before the commission that that money was passed on to Mr. Zuma, but the evidence that the money was given to him was there. It's overwhelming.
And so your question is, Chief Justice, I'm sorry to cut in, but
yes.
I sense that your question is, why are people like the former Minister of State Security, David Mahlobo, sitting in the executive?
The question is exactly that, but it's the question that people are asking because it's evidence that they heard about. It's piles and piles of evidence. People who worked for the State Security Agency risked their lives to come and help the commission. In fact, you might or might not recall that on one day when we were hearing the evidence of a witness from state security agents whose name was not disclosed, while we were hearing that evidence, we also heard that I think the previous weekend there was something that had happened that threatened his or her life. Now, people took risks to come and give evidence to the commission.
Yeah.
Because I had been calling to the public and say, please, if you know anything concerning corruption, come forward and give evidence. And people took their risks. They came. They gave evidence. But now you say, over a year later on, somebody like that is still in cabinet. The question is, what is the message that this sends to the public? So I think a lot of people think that the message that sends out to the public is, well, it's not a big deal if you have been involved in wrongdoing. If you are a politician or you belong to a certain party, it can just take whatever time and nothing will happen to you. It sends a wrong message when we fight corruption. These kinds of things undermine our fight against corruption.
Can I ask you
what is concerning? And we are not saying that the president must agree with every recommendation of the commission. He must agree with every finding. But he needs to make an assessment and make a decision and tell the nation, I agree with this, I don't agree with this, if that is how he wants to deal with it. But otherwise, people get concerned to say, what was the point? And those witnesses who gave evidence, they must be wondering, why did we waste our time and go and give evidence against a minister? Look, he's sitting pretty as a deputy minister and nothing has happened to him. So next time we want people to go and give evidence about corruption and state capture and people don't want to, we must not be surprised. People are getting killed when they want to go and give evidence and have the courts to deal with crime. They get killed. And people are going to ask the question, what is it worth to take all of those risks? Because nothing happens.
So, Chief Justice, your words are leading me to one particular example, and you and I will probably get a lot of backlash for this, but we've got to ask the question anyway. So when you say that it's as if people are doing this with impunity, knowing that there is not going to be any consequence, the former president, Jacob Zuma, following his refusal to come to your commission, we know the steps that followed. We're not going to revisit that history, but here's the point, and that is that a court said that he had not served his 15-month prison sentence for defying a court order. And what happened when he needed to go back to jail? He was released on remission. My point is the former president still faces a number of charges. There are ongoing, or there is an ongoing case against him. People of South Africa might be questioning, is there a point in prosecuting former President Jacob Zuma if the government of the day, this is going to be the attitude toward jailing him? What do you think was the kind of message that was sent out by the government of President Ramaphosa taking that kind of action?
Well, one, I won't speak a lot about it because I understand that there is litigation, but this I can say, that anyone who kept themselves informed about what people were saying at the time when this remission happened and he was released would simply know that there were a lot of people who were saying, well, if the government doesn't want him to serve sentence in jail, so what is this corruption trial all about that has been going on for so long? Because it means that even if he were to be found guilty, and of course at this stage we don't know if he will be found guilty, even if he were to be found guilty, if a judge sentences him to jail, it means that, something will be done to make sure he doesn't stay in jail. That is what people were asking that I am aware of. People are very concerned about that.
So is there a point, therefore, Chief Justice? I know you are in an invidious position, but is there a point in prosecuting the former president?
Well, I would say as long as the National Prosecuting Authority says it's got enough evidence to justify prosecuting him, he must be prosecuted. If the executive take steps, spend time in jail, let the country know that the NPA and the courts will have done their part, and let the executive deal with the public at that time. So I would not say that any trials must stop. I think we must continue doing what we believe is right. The NPA believes there is a strong case against him. That's why they are pursuing the charges. The courts are there ready to conduct a fair trial and assess evidence, and if they find that he is guilty, they will look into what the appropriate sentence should be and impose a sentence that will fit the circumstances. And if the executive does anything after that, let the people know that the courts and the NPA have done their part.
Chief Justice, let me ask you to remain where you are. We're going to take a break. When we return, we're going to ask the Chief Justice about the conduct of judges. Just joining us, you find us in the middle of a conversation with the country's head of the judiciary, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Chief Justice, I want to move our conversation to complaints against judges. And there is a particular judge president in mind, the judge president of the Eastern Cape bench, Xoli Mngambi. Has he been asked to step down following a sexual harassment case against him by a fellow court official?
Well, let me say that the judge president concerned and I have had certain discussions. At this stage, I don't think that I should disclose the contents of those discussions, and we may soon be having other discussions as well. But I must immediately indicate that in terms of the Constitution, a judge gets suspended by the President on the recommendation of the Judicial Service Commission when the matter of a complaint against him has reached a certain point in being processed. And that point hasn't been discussed or decided by the JSC, but the JSC would be dealing with the matter soon. The complainant and the judge president concerned were asked to make written representations recently, which they have made, and the JSC will meet soon to consider those representations and make decisions or recommendations that it might consider should be made.
Yeah.
But he is on leave at the moment, I can mention to you. He is on leave at the moment until, I think, end of November. It's leave that he is entitled to, that he requested because he was entitled to already. So at the moment he is on leave until the end of November, and what will happen beyond November is something that will be dealt with in due course. But he's on leave at the moment.
Okay, but I think what you are telling us is that that leave may not have been necessitated by this case that has been brought against him. But I quickly want to deal with this element still on the Judge President Benenge. You may or may not be aware of this. This past weekend, the City Press reporting that he not only granted but presided over his own son's admission as an attorney of the High Court, whose application was moved by his sister, meaning a daughter to the Judge President. The picture I'm painting to you, Chief Justice, does it satisfy the ethical and professional standards that are stressed by the Code of Judicial Conduct?
Well, you see, the difficulty is that he is not suspended at the moment, and because the point had not been reached at which the Constitution contemplates that he could be suspended. And it is quite common for judges, when their children get admitted as attorneys or advocates, to make arrangements to sit in the matter. So that does happen. He is on leave. He's not suspended. I saw the story that you are talking about. So he's not suspended, and until he is suspended, it's difficult to say you can't do this, you can't do that, because he's not suspended as yet. But he is on leave.
Yeah. The reason I was pressing on this matter, Chief Justice, is necessitated by sometimes the behavior of political figures, and I'm not going to shy away, of political figures like the EFF leader, Julius Malema, who not so long ago he saw it fit to basically scandalize a court. And we're talking about the magistrate, Toinette Olivier, where he basically accused her of writing a sponsored judgment. So I'm raising this case to link the point that I'm trying to make, and that is that, does it make it easy, for example, or does the judiciary make it easy for political figures to attack the judiciary, obviously for matters that may interest them, but in the process impugning the dignity of the judiciary?
Well, when we as members of the judiciary do not behave in the way we should behave, it does play into the hands of those who want to attack the judiciary. And I accept that we in the judiciary have our own challenges. And my message to the judiciary is always that we have to do our best to try and conduct ourselves in a manner that befits the office that we hold, judicial office, and that we should try and avoid anything that could help those who want to attack the judiciary to attack us. But again, one must say, if you talk about judges, we have in South Africa roughly around 250 judges. It is quite clear that whatever challenges there may be, they relate to a very small percentage of judges. And of course, at a certain stage, you might have accusations, you might have allegations which may later on not be proved, so one must always bear that in mind. But when you look at judges, it's really a very small percentage where there are serious concerns of behavior that may constitute misconduct.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of judges behave in a manner that doesn't attract any attacks or negativity.
Yeah. Chief Justice, you will know that Mr. Malema made these comments around this magistrate completely unsubstantiated. Do you believe that he owes Magistrate Olivier an apology? And if that is not going to be forthcoming, the kind of impact that remarks such as sponsored judgments, that kind of comment, what do you believe is going to be the impact on the larger public of South Africa?
Well, part of the time when Mr. Malema may have made some of the statements that he has made, I was out of the country attending a conference in Tanzania, which included a meeting of the Southern and Eastern Africa Chief Justices Forum. So for a whole week, I was not here. I'm not saying I'm not aware of some of the statements that he made, but I'm simply saying I understand he made statements over a certain period of time. So I may have missed some and got some. So because I was out of the country part of the time. I think that it's going to be important to try and obtain the full facts. But certainly that kind of attack on a member of the judiciary is something that is not known. I don't think that anybody has ever mounted that kind of attack on the judiciary, on a member of the judiciary. But it's going to be important to try and get all the facts, because some of the things that he was saying are things that may have happened in court, and I'm not aware that the magistrate has responded or anybody has put her side of the story. And it's going to be important to get all the information. But certainly it was an unprecedented kind of attack.
Yeah. Chief Justice, let's then move on to the failure to deliver reserved judgments within a reasonable time. And at the last count, based on your own annual report, there were over 180 reserved judgments outstanding for a period longer than 6 months. Has that number reduced, or does it continue to increase?
Well, I don't have the exact statistics in mind now, but I can say that we have issued another report which should be available on the website of the Office of the Chief Justice, I think maybe last week, that relates to the second term of the year. I can say that the issue of reserve judgments, you will find that this month the number goes down and then next month it goes up, because judgments get handed down like every day in different courts and judgment gets reserved. So the number could be going up and down, and numbers could be going up and down. But what I can say is that in respect of certain courts, the amount of reserve judgments and how long certain judgments have taken to be handed down remains a very serious issue. I have, I think maybe 2-3 months ago, I wrote to all the heads of court and urged them to please make sure that judges who have failed to hand down judgments beyond a certain time without a valid reason as far as the head of court is concerned, that in regard to them, the heads of court lay complaints with the Judicial Conduct Committee, so that then that can be investigated as a complaint. Now, that has been done in the past by, for example, the Judge President of the Gauteng Division of the High Court. We currently have 2 judges who failed to deliver judgments within certain periods of time, who are facing a tribunal, which will look into the question whether or not they are competent to be judges. So that is happening. So the judges president in the various divisions have been urged to make sure that they are on top of the situation and that they lay complaints when there are delays that are completely unacceptable against in regard to the handing down of certain judgments. But I must just also tell you, Xoli, that sometimes the challenge with regard to reserved judgments is that the courts have to rely sometimes, quite often, on acting appointments. Those are practitioners who come and act for a month or for a week, for 2 weeks, and go back. And sometimes when they go back, their practice is busy and they take long. But I don't want any impression to be created that I'm blaming acting judges, because there are many judgments which are reserved by permanent judges. But part of the problem is simply the load. I mean, if you take, for example, the labor court, it's one of the courts which have got quite a high level of reserve judgments in certain cities. They've had need for posts to be created for more judges to be appointed for quite a long time. I have intervened. I've called the Minister of Justice. We have had a meeting with the Minister of Justice and the Judge President of the Labour Court and myself to say various posts must be created so that more judges can be appointed. But that has not happened. The Minister of Justice is aware of this. It's just that government things seem to take long. So you have those situations where the workload requires more judges, but more judges have not been appointed because new posts must be created, and that seems to take long. But it is something that we continue to work on. I can tell the public that overall, judges work extremely hard. When there are reserved judgments that take long, generally speaking, it's not because a judge is lazy. It's just that there is just too much on their plate. And it's, as a human being, you can only do so much. Of course, there are some where there is simply no excuse, no valid reason for delaying, and maybe because that particular judge is lazy, or maybe because that particular judge doesn't care what's going to happen. But that's an exception. Most judges work extremely hard.
Chief Justice, I'm completely out of time, but the basis of this question obviously has the general public in mind, because it is them who either lose confidence in the judicial system or gain trust and confidence in that very same judicial system. And I have one family in mind, and it is the Senzo Meyiwa case. This past October, that family is now waiting for 9 years to see justice. And Judge Chifiwa Maumela was the judge who presided over this case. He's now on suspension based on exactly what we are talking about. What would your message be to this family that has waited this long for justice?
Well, Oli, when we talk about delays in the system, we need to bear in mind the various processes. The delay in this matter is the delay really more the delay that happened while the matter was not in court. I think it took about 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more than that, before it was brought to court. So
fair point.
Most of the delay is not with the court. But once the court has started, you will see that the judge president of Gauteng put a judge aside and said, you deal with this case and this case only. And obviously he said so because he appreciated that the family and South Africans wanted the matter to be finalized as soon as possible. So, of course, it so happened that Judge Maumela had to leave and another judge brought in. But you will see that even with this judge, this is a retired judge who has been brought in specially to be available for this case and no other case, because the judiciary is showing its appreciation for the need for finality.
Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, let me thank you very much for your time. Hopefully, next time we are going to be in studio, face to face, and we hopefully will deal with some of these intractable issues facing our country. But for now, thank you indeed for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Xoli.
All right, the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo talking to us there. Okay, that brings us closer to the hour of 12 o'clock, and it is my time to say goodbye to you and thank you for watching. Up next, Tuduzile Ramela with your daytime updates.